Hi there, I'm Ingrid. And yes, my sister fired me. Right after our dad handed her the company. She didn't call, didn't explain, just erased me like I was never part of it. But what she didn't know was that pushing me out would cost her everything. She thought I'd disappear quietly. The first thing that felt off was the coffee. I always brewed it at 7:15, just before the office started buzzing. That morning, it tasted weak, like someone had used the last of the good beans and left me with dust. I stood by the kitchenette window overlooking downtown Seattle, watching fog crawl between buildings. The city was wide awake, but something in me wasn't. I'd come in early, as usual. Old habit. I liked having a quiet hour before the meetings kicked off, to prep, reset, breathe. The Kingswell presentation was scheduled for Friday. It was our biggest account, one I'd nurtured through delays, cultural barriers, and at least two near deals that almost died on the table. 6 months of work, hundreds of details, all carefully woven into a final strategy I was planning to review today. But when I logged into the system, my access was gone. At first, I stared at the screen like it had misread my name. Then I tried again. Same result. I checked my permissions, clicked through what I could, and then there it was. An email from IT, auto-generated, no greeting. Per CEO directive, your administrative access to client records has been temporarily reassigned. No explanation, no signature, no context. Temporarily reassigned? I sat back in my chair, blinking. My fingertips hovered over the keyboard, unsure what to do next. Something twisted in my stomach. I reminded myself to breathe. This had to be a mistake. Probably some system migration thing no one told me about. It happens sometimes when they pushed updates. Still, I felt the weight in my chest shift. Not panic, yet, but a kind of quiet dread. The kind that doesn't shout, only hums in your bones. By 9:20 a.m., things got louder. I was scanning email threads for Kingswell documents I knew I'd written. Documents that now showed restricted access. When Rachel, one of the junior analysts, leaned over from the next desk. "You're not heading upstairs?" I looked at her, confused. "Upstairs?" "For the Kingswell strategy briefing," she said. "It started 10 minutes ago. I figured you'd be leading it." Her voice softened near the end, like she wasn't sure whether to keep going. My heart paused. I stood, slowly. From where I sat, I had a direct line of sight to the main stairwell. And right on cue, I watched a group of team leads file past, all headed toward the executive floor, holding folders with my diagrams, my charts, my research. At the end of the group, I saw Todd, the new ops manager, who'd only been at Velour and Crest for 4 months. He was smiling like a man who didn't understand the room he just stepped into, holding my notes. I stepped into the hallway, intercepting Jenna, Serafina's assistant. She was usually polite. Today, she looked like she didn't want to make eye contact. "Is there a reason I wasn't included in that meeting?" Her lips pursed. "The new leadership is shifting direction," she said, then walked off without waiting for a reply. I stared after her, frozen. There it was. New leadership. That meant Serafina. 2 weeks ago, my father officially stepped down and handed the CEO role to his eldest daughter. I should have seen this coming. She and I had never fought outright. Not exactly. But she never forgot that I came from his second marriage, and she came from the first. I was the second family, the shadow that moved in after her mother left. And though we worked under the same roof for years, we'd never been aligned. Still, I thought we had professional respect. Apparently, that's not what she thought. By noon, I sat alone in the break room with my half-eaten salad wilting in front of me. People walked in and out, speaking in half-quiet tones. No one looked directly at me. No one asked if I was okay. I stared at my phone, tempted to text my father. But what would I even say? "Did you know she's cutting me out? Did you plan this?" Instead, I scrolled. News. Emails. Empty notifications. I thought about the first time I signed the Kingswell account. It had taken 4 months to even get their procurement manager to return my call. And now the entire account was being restructured behind a closed door, without me. The worst part wasn't being excluded. It was that no one bothered to tell me I was. At 3:45, I went back to my desk. A few of my team members smiled in that awkward, trying not to get involved way. I nodded politely. Then I looked down at my company badge. Still functional, still letting me through the doors, still scanning green in the elevators. But the truth was, I wasn't sure it would tomorrow. The next morning, the office felt colder. Not in temperature, just energy. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was the look people gave when they saw me walking in. Like I was a painting that had already been taken down, and no one had figured out where to store it yet. I hung my coat, booted up my computer, and told myself today would be normal. At 8:53 a.m., my inbox pinged. Subject: Kingswell concern, internal process delay, CC, entire senior management team, from strategy and ops. I clicked it open, my chest already tightening before I read a word. The message outlined an internal delay due to recent misalignment in prior communications led by Ingrid Velour. It mentioned my name twice, casually, but precisely. It stated that I had not provided complete documentation to ensure forward movement. It implied I was the reason Kingswell was hesitating, but that wasn't true. None of it. I scanned the thread again, checking every attachment. There was a version of a client response draft I'd never seen. The numbers weren't mine. The language didn't sound like me, and everyone had already read it. Around me, keyboards clicked and phones rang, business as usual. I sat frozen, blinking at the screen, while the blood in my body felt like it was migrating somewhere else. My hands itched, like I needed to punch through the monitor. By 10:15, I was in the archive system, digging through version histories. That document, the fake response, had been saved at 1:12 a.m. under Todd's credentials. Todd, who had joined 4 months ago. Todd, who had walked into the Kingswell meeting with a smile like it was just another Tuesday. I sat back, jaw tight. It wasn't just carelessness. It was planted, and someone made sure it went to everyone before I ever had a chance to speak for myself. I needed answers. So I left my desk quietly and made my way to the marketing floor. Tamsin looked up from her screen when I entered. We'd started at the company around the same time. She used to be on my team before she transferred. We hadn't spoken much lately, but there was still a sliver of something unspoken between us. Something people like Serafina hated. Memory. I didn't even need to ask. Tamsin nodded before I opened my mouth. "They've been splitting up your accounts all week," she said in a low voice. "Serafina signed off on it. It's not just Kingswell. You've basically been carved out." I closed my eyes for a second. "And no one told me." "That was the point," she said. "They wanted it quiet." I left her office feeling like I was carrying someone else's bones inside me. Each step back to my floor felt heavier than the last. By early afternoon, my desk felt like a spotlight in a dark theater, too exposed and yet somehow invisible. I stayed until 6:30, even though I wasn't doing much beyond rereading emails and quietly erasing the draft of a resignation letter I'd typed in my notes app. Later that evening, I found myself parked outside the corner gas station on Rainier Avenue, staring blankly at a green light that had long since turned red again. I wasn't crying, not really. It was just that my eyes burned and my hands wouldn't stop gripping the steering wheel. I thought about last Thanksgiving, eating microwaved stuffing in the office lounge while finalizing the Kingswell proposal. I remembered being on a Zoom call during my cousin's wedding. I remembered the weekend my mother was hospitalized, and I rescheduled the ER visit so I could take a client call. And now a single email with a reply all had rewritten the story. My name was no longer attached to my own work. My face was now the scapegoat for someone else's mess. The shame wasn't from the lie. It was that so many people believed it without hesitation. I turned the key and drove home. Quiet. Mechanical. Tomorrow, I'd find out what else they planned to take away. I didn't sleep much. I remember checking the clock around 2:11 a.m., lying flat in bed, staring at the ceiling fan as if it could spin some kind of answer out of the stale air. The only sound in my apartment was the occasional creak of the building settling into itself, just like I was trying to do. Settle. Breathe. Think. By the time sunlight crept through the blinds, I was already dressed. No makeup, just tinted moisturizer and a braid that felt more like armor than a hairstyle. I walked into the office right before 8 a.m., head high, heart uncertain. I passed through security like a ghost. Badge still worked, but barely anyone looked at me. When I reached my desk, there was already a calendar alert waiting. Subject: Performance Concerns Review. Urgent time: 9 a.m. Location: HR, lower level, conference room 2. I stared at the screen long enough that my monitor went into sleep mode. I showed up to the meeting at 8:59, knocking twice before walking in. 2 people sat at the long rectangular table, Sandra from HR and Brent, our legal liaison. No smiles, no welcome, just quiet protocol. Sandra began reading from a printed form before I even sat down. There have been multiple concerns raised about your recent conduct, Ingrid. Terms like uncooperative, volatile, and resistant to feedback came up repeatedly. I blinked. From who? Brent replied, without looking up from his laptop. Anonymous submissions. We're protecting their identities. Anonymous? My voice cracked slightly, just enough to make me mad at myself. So we're holding a review based on whispers, on unverified input? Sandra kept her tone even. We're not making a final decision. This is just a formal warning. I looked at the paper she slid across the table. My name. A formality. A wound wrapped in corporate formatting. I didn't argue. Not because I agreed, but because I saw it clearly now. This wasn't about collaboration. It was extraction. I signed the document with a pen I nearly snapped in half. By 9:32, I was walking back toward my desk, with a strange calmness pressing against my ribs. Like the body knows what the soul hasn't caught up to yet. My inbox was flooded, but none of it mattered. Not the memo from accounting, not the system update. Only one thing made me pause. There was a single folded letter on my keyboard. I picked it up slowly. Ingrid, I'm sorry. I can't stay in a place that treats you like this. You taught me how to lead, and they're punishing you for it. Nolan. He'd written it by hand, not typed, not emailed. He left it like a quiet apology. I sat down. Nolan had been with me since his internship. I'd pushed to get him hired full-time. I'd walked him through client calls, late edits, even a few tears after his mother passed away. And now, he was gone. The office around me went still. My team avoided my eyes. One of them walked past with a box of binders, mine. Not a single word was said. At lunch, I didn't eat. I just walked the halls. I passed framed photos of company parties. One of them had me, 2 years ago, holding a glass of champagne next to Serafina. We both smiled, but now it looked staged, like actors mid-rehearsal. The hallway smelled like printer toner and recycled air. I used to love the rhythm here, the buzz of minds building something together. Now, it just felt like static. I stopped at the corner window, staring down at the city. People moved fast, cars lined up at red lights, phones to ears, eyes on nothing. This place used to mean something to me. I gave it more hours than I gave my marriage. I missed anniversaries, skipped family holidays. And now they were rewriting my legacy piece by piece. I whispered aloud, just to myself. I built this place, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. As I turned back toward the hallway, my reflection in the glass stopped me. They thought they could erase me, replace me, fold me up and file me away with a few anonymous notes and one dirty memo. They didn't realize something had shifted. I wasn't the Ingrid they remembered, and I wasn't going to let them finish writing my story for me. Sleep came in fragments, restless and shallow. By the time my alarm buzzed at 6:30 a.m., I was already sitting on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, thumb hovering over unread emails like they were grenades waiting to go off. That's when I saw it. Forwarded at 3:17 a.m. from Nassim Khalid, Kingswell's lead negotiator. The subject line was calm, but the message underneath carried an undertow of concern. We're unclear on the current direction of the Veller proposal. The new point of contact seems misaligned with our previously discussed terms. Please advise. Nassim. He had CC'd one of Kingswell's senior legal advisors. That wasn't a mistake. It was a move. Strategic. Public within private channels. My stomach clenched. Vindication and dread tangled in the same breath. I reread it twice, then once more out loud. It was careful, professional. But anyone in our business knew exactly what Nassim was saying. Where is Ingrid, and what the hell is going on? I placed the phone face down on the kitchen counter and stood in my quiet apartment, suddenly aware of every tick of the old wall clock. If Serafina thought removing me would be seamless, she was about to learn otherwise. By the time I arrived at the office, tension hung in the air like humidity before a storm. The receptionist offered a strained smile. I returned it without pause. As I walked past the glass conference rooms, I caught glimpses. People gathered in corners, laptops open, murmuring in clipped tones. I paused near the printer station and overheard it. Just 3 words from someone in legal. "Where's Ingrid now?" It was the first time in weeks I heard my name said, without a whisper or a warning. Inside the operations suite, Serafina paced in front of the projector screen, flanked by Todd and Jenna. Emergency meetings. Likely spinning a new version of the narrative to clean up the one they'd ruined. I didn't enter. I didn't need to. Their expressions were enough. Tight jaws, darting eyes, fingers tapping pens too fast. The wheels were coming loose. Still, no one said anything directly to me. HR still averted their gaze. But a few colleagues, those who once looked past me, now met my eyes when we passed in the hallway. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. I saw something flicker there. Hesitation. Maybe regret. Around 3 p.m., I left the office. No announcement, no explanation. I just walked out, drove east across the bridge, and parked outside the house I hadn't visited in months. My father opened the front door before I could knock, as if he'd been standing behind it all along. "Ingrid," he said, surprised, but not shocked. "Do you have a few minutes?" He stepped aside. "Always." His living room smelled like old leather and the faint citrus cologne he never stopped wearing. The same gray recliner. The same fireplace that had been fake since I was 6. I didn't plan to say much. I couldn't. But I had to let something slip through. Just enough. "I'm not asking for protection," I said. "But if you think everything's running smoothly up there, it's not." He didn't interrupt. He just listened. "They're losing Kingswell," I added quietly, "because they removed the person who built the relationship." He looked down at his hands, those large, strong hands that once taught me how to hold a steering wheel. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "the people we protect need to be tested, and sometimes they fail." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "And what happens when they fail at someone else's expense?" His gaze didn't move, but something in his silence cracked open the air between us. Maybe he knew, maybe he didn't. But now he couldn't pretend not to. I stood to leave. He didn't stop me. Back in my car, I didn't drive away immediately. I just sat there, hands on the wheel, watching the old house through the windshield like it might vanish if I blinked too long. The war had started. Not with an explosion, but with a question left unanswered. His silence said more than any answer he could have given. By the time I got home that night, the silence in my apartment didn't feel peaceful. It felt loaded. I dropped my bag by the door, pulled off my blazer, and stood in the dark kitchen for a moment, letting my eyes adjust. I didn't bother with dinner. I just poured a glass of water and scrolled through my notifications, half dreading what might be waiting. And there it was. A message from Tamsin, time-stamped just 20 minutes earlier. No subject, just a file. Thought you should hear this. T. I sat on the couch and hit play. The audio crackled for a second, then steadied. I recognized the space, one of the smaller conference rooms on the second floor, where marketing often huddled. Then came the voice. Serafina, clear, steady, sharp. We need to remove Ingrid before Friday. No one will risk pushing back if we keep the narrative tight. She's already isolated. Just finish it. I paused it, sat in silence, then hit play again. This time, I didn't flinch. Her words didn't hurt as much as her tone did. Cold, clinical, like I was a stain she'd been meaning to scrub out for years. She didn't just want control, she wanted the story. I set the phone down gently, but my hands shook, not from fear, from the final clarity. She had made it personal. So would I. The next morning, I walked into the office with something different in my stride. Not anger, not revenge, intention. I kept to my routine, brewed my coffee, replied to emails, said nothing. At 2 p.m., Margot Dell, one of the senior board members, appeared outside my office door. She didn't knock. She just raised an eyebrow like she was deciding whether or not to walk in. I nodded once. That was all she needed. She closed the door behind her. I'm not here on anyone's behalf, she said first. Let's just get that straight. I leaned back slightly, unsure where this was going. I've watched this place bend for Serafina, she continued, but not break. Yet. I didn't interrupt. I didn't trust myself to speak. Margot crossed her arms. If you choose to fight, I won't stop you. The board is paying closer attention than you think. But attention doesn't mean support, not without something concrete. I exhaled, steady. I don't need everyone to back me. Just enough people not to look away. Margot gave the faintest hint of a smile. That's the first smart thing I've heard in weeks. She didn't say she was on my side. She didn't need to. After she left, I sat alone at my desk. The clock read 4:12. Outside the window, Seattle's sky was beginning to bruise with early winter dusk. I opened my email, typed my father's name into the to field, then stared at the blinking cursor. I started writing. You gave her the company, but you gave me something else. You taught me to never walk away from truth. Then I deleted it, rewrote it, deleted it again. Eventually, I left it saved in drafts. No subject line, no signature. Just a truth I wasn't quite ready to release. That night, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, hands gripping the counter. The face staring back at me didn't look defeated. It looked awake. I wasn't waiting for the next attack. I wasn't waiting for permission, or justice, or even fairness. I was done waiting to be invited back into the room. The next morning, I didn't bother choosing my outfit carefully. I wore black. Not as a symbol, just practicality. It hid fury better than beige ever could. I walked into the building at 8:52 a.m., coffee in hand, and headed straight to my desk. But before I could sit, my phone buzzed. Come to Serafina's office, now. Jenna. No subject line, no punctuation beyond the period. No need to guess. I tossed my bag under my chair and made my way upstairs. The glass doors to the executive floor stood open, framing Serafina like she was posing for a magazine cover. She was sitting with one leg crossed over the other, posture perfect, a folder neatly closed in front of her. Ingrid, she said without looking up, have a seat. I didn't. This isn't personal, she started, in that soft, detached way people use when they're about to gut you with a smile. But you're no longer aligned with the direction we're taking. Your position is being dissolved, effective immediately. No HR rep, no security escort, just her. I stared at her for a long beat, not blinking. Then I took one step forward, voice calm but crystal clear. You just made your biggest mistake. She didn't flinch, but I saw it, the slightest twitch in her cheek. Then I turned around and walked out. No folder in hand, no speech, no collapse. By the time I got to the elevator, my pulse was steady. I didn't go home, not yet. Instead, I walked 2 blocks to the coffee shop near Pike Street, grabbed a booth in the corner, and opened my phone. First, I sent a message to Jude, the internal auditor. "You'll want to hear this." Then I attached the audio file of Serafina's meeting. Next, I texted Margot. "I'm ready." She replied with just 1 period. Back at my apartment that afternoon, I opened my notebook, the one I hadn't touched since my first year at the company. Inside were pages of notes I'd once used to train new hires, sketch strategies, map out recovery plans after failed quarters. Now, I turned to a blank page and wrote at the top, "Timeline, Serafina's internal strategy shift." Beneath it, I started listing. May 12th. Client assignments quietly reshuffled June 3rd. Budget reallocation away from client services. July 10th. First memo referencing collaboration concerns. Every dot connected. Every move now had context. The hunt had begun. Word spread fast. By 5 p.m., 3 different coworkers had texted me. Short, coded things like, "Thinking of you," or "That was low, even for her." I didn't respond. Not yet. At 6:17 p.m., I got the email that sealed it. From Nassim Khalid. To Edric Veller. Subject, Kingswell engagement status. Urgent. Due to significant shifts in communication and team structure, Kingswell is placing all further action on hold until Ingrid Veller is reinstated in her previous capacity. Our confidence in the original partnership terms is tied directly to her leadership and presence. We await your clarification. I read it 3 times. Then I forwarded it to Margot without a word. Serafina thought she'd taken the crown, but what she grabbed instead was a lit fuse. She may have won a battle, but she just stepped into a war. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't try to. I didn't need rest. I needed clarity. And clarity came at 7:42 a.m. in the form of a message from Margot. "Boardroom, 10 o'clock. You're on the invite." No other details, just that. I got dressed in silence, tied my hair back tighter than usual, and left the apartment without finishing my coffee. By 9:55, I was seated at the far end of the glass-walled conference room on the top floor. The board table gleamed like it had something to prove. Every chair was filled. Margot sat beside Edric, her arms crossed. Jude stood at the head of the table, a remote in one hand. The lights dimmed slightly. "We've concluded our digital audit," Jude began, clicking the first slide. What followed was a ruthless, methodical breakdown. Logan timestamps, IP addresses, file access logs, email headers, dozens of them. Every one of the sabotage instances, from altered spreadsheets to manipulated emails, could be traced back to a shared workstation. That workstation belonged to Serafina's executive assistant. Multiple entries, Jude continued, over the course of 5 weeks. He clicked again. The timeline glowed behind him. At first, the room was quiet. Then someone whispered near the end of the table. This wasn't a misstep. It was an operation. Gasps followed. Jude didn't flinch. He clicked again. An email forwarded from an internal printer queue. A draft resignation letter, unsigned, with a file name matching Nolan's final note, except this version listed Ingrid as the one who had pressured him to leave. False, planted. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I let the evidence speak for me. Then Jude stepped aside, and Margot stood. "There's one more thing," she said. A woman entered. She looked to be in her 60s, calm but alert. Her name tag read D. Ramsey. "My father's old assistant," I murmured to myself. She held a sealed manila folder. "We kept this archived," she said, placing it in front of Margot. "I was instructed never to share it, unless the company's integrity came under threat." The room held its breath. Inside was a contract review from years ago. A European investment deal Serafina had spearheaded and tanked. The report showed 7-figure losses due to premature disclosures, missed legal compliance, and internal misrepresentation. I remembered whispers. But this was confirmation. Edric's jaw tightened. He leaned forward slowly, elbows on the table, eyes closed, like the memory itself hurt. "She told me she learned from it," he muttered. Margot's voice sliced the air. "She didn't." Serafina stood in the doorway, arms folded, face unreadable. "I made mistakes," she said, stepping into the room. "But so has everyone here." "No one else tried to erase a co-founder to cover their own," Margot shot back. Serafina opened her mouth again, but Margot cut her off. "You had your turn." A beat of silence. Then another board member said what everyone was thinking. "She can't stay." Every eye turned to Edric. He stood up. Slowly, like every step cost him. He looked at me. "I gave her the company," he said. "But I gave you the truth. You knew how to carry it?" A few seats shifted. Someone cleared their throat, uncomfortable. Serafina didn't blink. She looked at me, not like a sister, not like a rival, like a stranger trying to decode the aftermath of her own storm. As Margot nodded toward security, Serafina's lips curled into something between a smirk and a threat. She passed behind my chair, pausing just long enough to say, "This isn't over." And then she was gone. I watched the elevator doors close behind her, her reflection shrinking to nothing in the polished steel. Nobody spoke for a long while. The boardroom cleared slowly. Chairs scraped back. Papers were gathered in silence. Margot gave me a single nod and slipped out. Edric didn't move. He stayed at the end of the table, hands flat on the surface, eyes staring into the wood grain as if it held answers. After the last person left, he finally looked at me. "Office," he said quietly. "Please." The walk down the hallway was quieter than it had ever been. In his office, he didn't sit right away. He stood by the window, his back to me, shoulders stiff. "I thought time would fix her," he said finally. "I thought I was buying her time to grow into it." I leaned against the edge of his desk. "You gave her the keys, but she crashed the car. That's not on you, that's on her." He turned slowly. His eyes looked older than they had the day before. "I thought you were the one who didn't want the weight." "I never wanted the crown," I said, "but I was willing to carry the cost." He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, quietly, he reached into the top drawer and pulled out a folder. "I should have done this weeks ago." He slid it across the desk. Inside, a new contract. Clear. Director, permanent. Executive Director, Client Strategy and Culture, a role above Serafina's. Reporting to the board. I signed it without looking up. By early afternoon, an all-hands emergency meeting was called. No one knew what to expect. The auditorium buzzed with confusion and speculation. The last time a meeting like this had been held was during a company-wide layoff years ago. Edric stood at the podium. "I want to address what's happened, and what will not happen again," he began. His voice was steady, though heavy. "Effective immediately, Serafina Velor is suspended pending final review. Ingrid Velor will oversee the Kingswell transition and lead cultural restructuring." A rustle of whispers swept the room. Some faces stiffened, others softened. I stepped up beside him. "I didn't come back to reclaim a title," I said. "I came back because this company deserves better than silence and sabotage." The words weren't rehearsed. They didn't need to be. The applause started slowly, uncertain, cautious. Then it built, solid, earnest. I nodded, once, then stepped back. We didn't take questions. We didn't need to. Later that evening, I returned to my office. The same chair, the same desk. But nothing felt the same. As I was packing a few things into drawers, I found something unexpected. A small envelope, no name on the outside. Inside, on unlined paper, in handwriting I knew as well as my own, were 4 words. "This should have been mine." No punctuation, no explanation, just that. I folded the note, placed it in a folder, and locked it in the drawer. Then I whispered, barely audible, "Maybe," but I earned it. I sat down, not as the girl who once waited for credit or the woman they underestimated, but as someone who finally knew her worth. Some endings aren't victories, they're releases. The next morning, I walked through the lobby of Velour and Company just like I always had. Only now, the air felt different. Not lighter, not heavier, just clearer. There was no announcement, no grand re-entry, just a quiet return to a desk that wasn't about prestige, but purpose. The first thing I did was reinstate the ethics reporting line that had quietly disappeared under Serafina's restructuring. It wasn't flashy, but it was necessary. Then I made a list of former team members who had left, not by choice, but by force. Some had already moved on, others returned my call. A few rejoined quietly, no press, no fanfare. It wasn't about undoing the damage. It was about starting again, one brick at a time. Margot and I reworked the leadership flowchart. Edric handed off more than I expected, maybe more than he wanted. But he didn't push back. Trust was something we were both learning to earn again. I didn't try to be approachable. I didn't try to be liked. But the whispers in the halls faded. Eyes met mine again, not out of fear, but out of respect. Some days, I stayed late just to walk the floors alone, to hear the hum of the place as it started to breathe again. That weekend, I sat in my apartment, feet tucked under me on the couch, reading over notes for the Kingswell renewal. It had been a full week since Serafina walked out. No press release, no public fallout, just silence. Rumors buzzed, of course. She moved to Florida. No, I heard she's in Michigan, starting over, somewhere quiet. Edric never brought her up again. Not at work, not at home. That Sunday afternoon, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. Her number was still there, buried under an old nickname I hadn't used in years. I stared at it. I didn't know what I expected. I let it ring 4 times. Then I hung up. I didn't leave a message. Because some wounds don't need closure. They need distance. A few days later, I caught my reflection in the mirror of the 3rd-floor restroom, the same one I used to hide in when the politics of the office felt too heavy. I looked at myself. I didn't see the woman who'd cried in that stall 2 years ago after Serafina had shut down her proposal in front of a full boardroom. I didn't see the sister who had once begged for inclusion. I saw someone else now. Someone who no longer needed to be explained or defended. Someone who knew she didn't rise because someone gave her permission. I reached into my blazer pocket and found a folded index card, a line I'd scribbled months ago during one of those long, uncertain nights. I'd written it without knowing why. Now I did. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's choosing to stop bleeding. I whispered it once, let it land. Then I walked out of the restroom and back into the office, not with a vengeance, not with regret, but with the full weight of who I'd become. There were no apologies, no redo. Just a choice to stop bleeding and start living. And if you've stayed with me this far, thank you. Maybe you've been in my shoes. Maybe not. But if you've ever been dismissed, underestimated, or made to feel small in a space you helped build, then you already understand the quiet strength it takes not to shatter. Here's what I learned. Silence doesn't protect you. Loyalty should never come at the cost of your dignity. And sometimes, walking back into the room is not about reclaiming power. It's about redefining it. I used to believe that keeping the peace meant staying quiet. Now I know. Peace built on silence is just fear with a smile. So, if you're standing at your own crossroads right now, maybe in your job, your family, or your own sense of worth, ask yourself, what story are you letting someone else write for you? And are you ready to pick up the pen? I'd love to know, has there been a moment in your life when you finally said, enough, I deserve better? Drop a comment below with A or just type 1 if this story hit home for you. Or tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one. And if you didn't connect with this video, I still want to hear from you. Tell me why. What did or didn't sit right? What's your story? Let's turn this comment section into a space of shared truth, not just opinions. And hey, If stories like this remind you of your own strength, your voice, your second chances, then hit that subscribe button, because I have more to share. This is Ingrid, and I may not be who I was when this began, but maybe, just maybe, neither are you.